2, 1. Welcome, Kurt.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Very good. Your American way. Welcome, sir. Have you been in army?
No.
No. Usually the army type guys, they say, welcome, sir, or thank you, sir.
You know what? I'm from a military family, so that's bred into me. But I never served. Not my thing. But my grandparents, all my aunts and uncles, and my great grandfather was a general in the U.S. Army. So
general.
He set the tone for the family in many ways.
Oh. Yeah. I just love the way the army type people like open the conversation. There is so much respect.
Yeah.
Say, sir, thank you, sir. So, good evening or good afternoon or good morning, Kurt. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, looks like we're going to talk about Bitcoin SV, everybody's favorite blockchain.
So good evening, everybody. You are most welcome to say hello. And hello, my fellow Latvian crypto community. Let us see how active are you going to be today. We are streaming across several platforms, some newer ones, some larger ones, some older ones, some newer ones. And the main brand is Host Maria, and that is a hosting company that I'm a founder of. But today we have a topic of Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. What is Bitcoin Satoshi Vision?
So, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, or Bitcoin SV, is it is the most complete, and in fact, the only complete implementation of the original Bitcoin protocol. So, Bitcoin, when it was released, had a full programming stack. The scripts have been deprecated in all of the other versions of Bitcoin. So, Bitcoin SV said, hey, Bitcoin had a lot of really cool features that disappeared before anybody even tried them. And so they have been re-implemented, resurrected, and they are live on the live net with no limitations. It is the only implementation of Bitcoin that has no block size limit, no child pays parent orphan limit. There's no limitations that are not set by whatever a miner is willing to do. If a miner wants to try to mine terabyte blocks and push virtual machines and Turing complete loops across the network, let them do it.
Wow. Okay. Good evening, Joel.
Hey, Joel.
So, the most complete features that have been taken off the Bitcoin.
Yes.
Who has taken off them? Who has taken them off?
A number of different people. There's no one individual who's guilty, so I'm not here to cast blame. But one of the very first ones was in 2010 or 2011. It was right after Satoshi Nakamoto left the project in late 2010. They wanted to find a good way to implement multi-signature wallets, and people were very unclear on what scripts would cause problems. They didn't know how to secure them, so. Pay to script hash was a soft fork added. It was programmed by Gavin Andreessen, who was at the time the head of the project. And it shut off a bunch of the scripting language in order to secure it in such a way that they knew it was secure. So P2SH is really commonly used by exchanges and custodians all over the world because it's something that shuts off Bitcoin's ability to do all kinds of higher level programming things, and so they got rid of a bunch of fun utilities in order to guarantee that it would just be secure and a secure multi-signature wallet. So it's great from a simple security standpoint, but it's basically like you turned off most of the function of your computer and you just sit there and say, yeah, but no one can steal my data. And so that's one example. There's been a number of other examples of that over the years. Where Bitcoin's features were turned off in order to heavily favor security while eliminating a bunch of other functionality.
So, and over the years, the main mission has been to make Bitcoin as secure as possible, yes? And just because of that?
Yes. In short, that has been how the narrative has gone. So every time there's been a debate, typically security has won out over usability. And then that started the block size war and what I like to call the Bitcoin Civil War, because there was a significant group of people throughout time who said, well, hey, but Bitcoin could be used to deploy complex tokens and smart contracts. And unfortunately, the people that were the maintainers of the GitHub repo, by de facto would say, no, we won't accept pull requests that don't favor security first. And therefore, Bitcoin evolved very much to be secure at the cost of any other usefulness. And that's what's caused so much community split. That's in fact why we have altcoins, and it's why we have multiple forks of Bitcoin as well.
Kurt, can I ask you? So, of course, we all know that Bitcoin, as it is today, it was born in 2009, January the 3rd, yes?
Yes.
Bitcoin Cash was born in August 2017.
Yes.
And then a year later, there was a fork.
Mm-hmm.
And then Satoshi Vision was born. Was it?
I don't like to say born. I like to say split. I think of these things as a divorce. So it's like a sort of rebirth or a new opportunity. But yes, it was November of 2018 that Bitcoin SV became a separate blockchain.
Why did it happen?
Well, going back to 2017, I mean, the roots really were planted. This is like talking about World War II without talking about World War I, right?
Yes.
So
let us start all the way 2017, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So in 2017, there was the SegWit 2x conversation was being had. Most of the community, in fact, a lot of the people who are still in charge of the Bitcoin Core repo, signed an agreement to raise the block size on Bitcoin up to 2 megabytes in exchange for implementing the SegWit protocol. And so that was the compromise. And it didn't make everyone happy, but it was everybody giving a little in order to keep the community together. Well, as the fork day approached in late 2017, it became clear that even the people that had signed the agreement to raise the block size to 2 megabytes, they had backed off. They created a very toxic social media campaign about why Bitcoin needed to remain a 1 megabyte block size forever, and that SegWit needed to happen regardless of what else was agreed upon. So very quickly, the big block Bitcoin community said, okay, well, you guys reneged on your agreement, and therefore we are going to go the direction that we agreed upon, and we're not going to implement SegWit because that was our compromise to you, and you have balked on your compromise to us. So we are going to take the original Bitcoin protocol as it stands today, and we are going to fork it away, and we are going to continue to develop the Bitcoin roadmap as we saw it, or as we believe that Satoshi and Gavin and Mike Hearn and all of the people that were in charge of the project in the early days wanted to take it. Well, that also precipitated a massive social media war, a lot of conversation about which one is the real Bitcoin. And of course, most people are not really sophisticated enough to have that conversation from a technical standpoint. So they're more likely to look at the opportunity from an investment standpoint, and that's simple, and that's what makes sense. Similar conversations began to happen in the Bitcoin Cash community in the middle of 2018. When it came time for the next upgrade to the network, about half the community wanted to raise the block size limit to 128 megabytes and continue to eliminate the things that were added by Bitcoin Core. And then the other half of the community wanted to keep the block size limit at 32 megabytes and add more new things to the protocol. So ideas that were never discussed in Bitcoin previously. So kind of turning it into its own separate roadmap, separate from, the Bitcoin roadmap of the last 10 years at that point. So Bitcoin SV split on November 15th, 2018, because they wanted to raise the block size limit more, and they wanted to continue to return to the
Bitcoin Cash did split, not Bitcoin SV.
Well, that's complicated. So it was a hash war.
Are you saying so? In 2000, no, but let us make it clear. In 2017, Bitcoin Cash was born. Yes. Well, it forked off the Bitcoin.
Correct. Yep.
And then in 2018.
In 2018, what should have happened, what the Bitcoin SV miners and community thought was going to happen, is that we were going to collect our hash together, and we were going to bring the most proof of work to the Bitcoin SV node implementation in order for Bitcoin Cash to have no block size limit and to restore the original Bitcoin protocol. Unfortunately, the developers from Bitcoin ABC, along with help from Bitcoin.com, Roger Ver, his mining pool, and Roger's relationships with Kraken and Coinbase and some of these other people. Remember, Roger is a seed investor in most of these old companies.
Oh, yes.
He had them all agree that it doesn't matter how much hash power comes in signaling that they want Bitcoin SV to be the rule set. Instead, we are going to decide that Bitcoin ABC is Bitcoin Cash, and no matter what happens, Bitcoin SV will not be called Bitcoin Cash. So we are going to force a split. So they sent out software that cannot be reorganized by Nakamoto consensus. Hash power can't tell Bitcoin Cash what to do. So Bitcoin Cash is governed entirely by the Bitcoin ABC node team, or they were until about a month ago, which they got split off again because this is the problem with developer centralization. But Bitcoin SV split against its will. Bitcoin SV was never supposed to exist. It was not anybody's desire for there to be a separate Bitcoin SV chain or any of that. We were fighting to be Bitcoin Cash and to make Bitcoin Cash an unbounded, no block size limit chain, and we got kicked out of the community for it, essentially. So the split was a very unique split in the history of Bitcoin.
And how did you manage to lose? I just do not understand the whole system. As I understand, who has got the most hashing power wins.
So
and you guys and Satoshi Vision had way much more.
Yes, a lot more.
Even up to the point where your founder or your leader, can I call him your leader?
Who's that?
Craig Wright. What do you got? Is he still your leader?
I don't think of him as a leader in the sense that most people would.
Okay.
But I would consider Craig a colleague. I've known Craig for a number of years. He is a thought leader. It very much is his belief that Bitcoin should not have any limits that are set by a protocol developer. So if that was his idea, then in that sense, I would agree that he is a leader on that concept. So
and up to the point where he threatened with 51% attack to Bitcoin Cash. He did make those threats publicly.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That was really strange to see, especially from a guy who claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto, especially from that position. A guy who says, well, if you want to, you can fork us off as long as you wish to. And here he goes.
It's because a 51% attack doesn't really actually exist in Bitcoin. If you go back to read the white paper and explaining where the governance of Bitcoin occurs, it's that the most honest nodes with the most proof of work and the most hash power decide the governance structure and which chain is the most valid. So it is their job to enforce the rules, and therefore whoever is enforcing the rules is the valid chain, and that's the sort of nuanced position that many people don't understand, is that Bitcoin is not something that's up for debate. It is a set of rules that is built in order to enforce other rules. It is designed to enforce the truth. And so if the truth is not popular and lies become the popular thing, or a popularity contest puts something that is not Bitcoin into the forefront of the conversation, then honest nodes, there might only be one honest node running the network, and that would be very unfortunate. But the rule set of Bitcoin is what matters, and if the rules don't matter, then none of it matters, in my opinion. So it's a fundamentalist position about the meaning of Bitcoin.
Kurt, you are using some really dangerous words, really lies and stuff like that, and difference in opinions. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. When I heard of Satoshi's vision, I actually thought, wow, that's cool. I really like these fundamentalist ideas, really, as long as they do not accuse others and do not attack on others. So if there are rules, so you had majority of hashing power, did you?
Yes. Yeah, by a large margin. It was something like 85% of hash power was signaling for Bitcoin SV.
So why didn't you become the real Bitcoin Cash?
Because people do not fundamentally believe in proof of work.
But
that's the short answer.
Rules are rules.
Plain and simple. If we agree to, let's say, play a game of soccer, and we agree to the rules of soccer, but one side has referees that allow the other side to continually kick the other team in the shins and cheat in little ways, then the rules cease to matter. And so what happened is we agreed to a contest. We agreed to allow hash power to decide which version is the real Bitcoin Cash. But then when it came time for the separation, so the chain split, and we were ignorant we're watching it live. I was actually on a live stream when it occurred. The first block happened, and I was like, well, that should reorganize. I know how Bitcoin works, and that chain will be orphaned, and we'll continue. And they just stayed split, and they kept building blocks. And I'm like, well, gosh, that doesn't make sense. Well, there was a developer on the other side. He was on a Bitcoin.com podcast at the same time, and I forget his name at the moment, but he's friends with a bunch of he's a good old friends with Daniel Krawitz, who's another friend of mine. But he's looking at the code, and he's a software developer, so he's looking at, and he said the same thing, like, we split and we're not being real. Like, why isn't one side winning? So most of the people thought that either ABC or BSV would win and the other would die, but neither side was dying. So people immediately are auditing the code, like they're opening it up and saying, hey, have we missed something? Well, what we discovered is that Bitcoin ABC had added both a checkpoint and a rolling 10-block checkpoint. So every 10 blocks, the software was designed not to see who had the most hash power or the most proof of work. It was designed to see who the developer was by his signature hash. And it was designed to only follow the lead developer's signature under all circumstances. So hash power could not reorganize the Bitcoin ABC chain under any circumstances. And we did not know this until, like I said, on their other live stream. He looked at it, he's auditing the code, and you can see there's a party going on behind him. He starts turning around and saying, hey, God, are we cheating? Did we just, and he started saying, we effed up. We really effed up. Like, what is this? So he got very upset, very visibly upset, because he wanted an honest war too. And the people on the Bitcoin SV side did the same thing. We're scrambling and saying, oh my gosh, in the middle of this hash war, they cheated. They are playing a different game by different rules. So now the chains have split, and so, they should get thrown off the exchanges. We looked at that and said, well, they're just cheaters. That's terrible.
Okay.
But we woke up in the morning to all of these Roger Ver-owned businesses. I mean, I'm talking BitPay, Coinbase, Kraken, CoinEx Exchange, a bunch of Asian exchanges. So it's all of these partners already have everything set up. Here's the new BSV coin. That everybody gets new BSV, and we keep saying, no, there is no BSV. We are Bitcoin Cash. We came with the most hash power.
So that was masterminded by Roger Ver and his
allegedly. It seems that way because his pool, the Bitcoin.com mining pool, is a significant mining pool on Bitcoin Cash. He seems to be the guy who rented hash power from Antpool, which is owned by Bitmain and some of these other players. And all of the people who are involved are in some way connected to Roger. So it seems obvious that it was Roger's plan, but that's yet to be fully determined. But it doesn't really make sense for it to have been anyone else, at least in my opinion.
I haven't met the guy, but what I've heard, what I've read, and in Bitcoin Billionaires in the book as well, he's not put in the best light. Absolutely awesome book, but he seems to be determined, smart.
He is. I've known Roger casually for a few years too. I don't know him well, but we've spoken. In many ways, I respect him. In 2012, he was a guy that that actually inspired me. When I was a new Bitcoiner, Roger Ver was a popular Bitcoiner. I loved his videos. I loved his content. I love his passion. So he deserves credit for me being a Bitcoin person. But yes, we have fallen very much on different sides of of a lot of things now. So it's unfortunate.
So do I understand you correctly? And my apologies, as I do not know this process. So there was Bitcoin Cash. Then you guys decided for a contest to see which side wins. One
Yes.
side took the name, and that was a temporary name, Bitcoin ABC, and another temporary name was Bitcoin SV. Or
Yes.
not.
Correct.
And then the winner would take it all, like
Would become
yes,
become Bitcoin Cash.
Bitcoin
Yes.
Cash. So these
Yes.
were two temporary names. Okay, and then somebody, well, are there rules in the war?
I mean, that's the question. Are you really willing to win if you're not willing to cheat? And that's the question.
To cheat? Was that really cheating?
If you're attempting to be, if the conversation is about who is going to be the most valid version of Bitcoin, then yes, they 100% cheated. If your goal is simply to win a ticker war and to, create pump value and all of that, then maybe not. They don't see that as beguiling, but Bitcoin cashers have a tendency to be to have a very anarchist worldview, and so they may not see it as like, hey, we did what it took to win, and there you have it. So, but it's a worldview thing. These are complicated philosophical conversations. It's a moral and an ethical thing to me.
Thank you, Kurt. Oh, that's really interesting, and I did hear like lots of different versions of the history of SV.
Yeah.
I've never heard that it was born in this way. That you discovered that, hey, we are a new coin.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, and that's the funny thing. People don't realize it. Like even Craig, like I know Craig Wright, I know Calvin Ayre, and they were very upset at the way that it went down. And people have this notion in their minds that they wanted to create their own coin to do whatever they wanted with. And in reality, we were all very disappointed at how it all went down, because we wanted to fight. We wanted to prove that a hash war could end in consensus and that we could shake hands. We wanted to continue to work with Roger Ver and everybody. We didn't see them as enemies. We saw them as people with whom we had a disagreement, but we thought that we all agreed on the importance of Bitcoin's mining as a governance model. And so it was a big it was kind of like finding out that your spouse cheated on you. We thought we were allies who had a disagreement, and It turned out that they saw us as enemies, and that was sad more than anything. It bummed me out. I didn't like it at all.
So Machiavellian. Like really like from the prince or something. It comes out. God, that's no, from my side. My apologies. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Evil, horrible. Yes, you betrayed your friends and stuff like that, but beautifully done. Okay, so what happened after that?
Well, from there, there was a good 5 or 6 weeks where everybody was sort of scrambling to figure that out, because nobody had any business development. Like nobody was even sure who was supposed to be in charge, because
nobody was prepared for that.
Yes, so that was a very weird time. There was no replay protection between the chains, so you could send a Bitcoin Cash transaction and accidentally send BSV as well, and then the same thing the other direction. So all of a sudden everybody's wallets were confusing, and then there was about the 6-week period where various people had to make a decision. Companies like MoneyButton or CoinText or some of these Bitcoin Cash projects had to decide, okay, am I going to follow the Bitcoin Cash chain, or am I going to follow the Bitcoin SV chain? And so there was a lot of business decisions that had to be made there, and it was exciting to see who came to join BSV, because I made the decision as soon as I saw the rolling checkpoints and that they undermined consensus. I was done. I said, well, Bitcoin Cash is not philosophically something that I can support anymore, because they don't believe in Bitcoin. And so it was really fun to see the people who joined up. And then over the next 6 months, there was a release of a major protocol upgrade on BSV for what they call the Quasar protocol, that allowed for a 2 gigabyte block size limit on Bitcoin SV. And then in February of 2020, the protocol became locked forever. We eliminated the block size limit. We got rid of all software protocol level limitations on Bitcoin, and we completely restored the original Bitcoin stack. So we eliminated things like P2SH and RBF, a lot of the things that exist in Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash that were created over the last several years. And we have fundamentally restored Bitcoin to the way that it was at the very beginning, but only added...
Yes, not the very beginning still, no?
So
as it was born in January 2009. In August
Correct.
2009, there was that major vulnerability. 200 billion, 180 billion Bitcoins were generated out of thin air, and so they fixed the vulnerability in a couple hours, and they rolled back.
It was a hard fork. Yes.
So, was it?
It was.
And so, have you kept that implementation?
It is not that implementation specifically. So, at that point, when that had occurred, there had already been a number of major changes to the code that had been pushed by guys like Hal Finney and some of the early developers that were working on it. And there was like 5 or 6 guys at that point that were pushing code, and ultimately Satoshi got to choose what was implemented at that time. But if you look back, if you look back at the if you look back at the original stack, so this has a lot to do with the script stack. It is the restored script stack from the original Bitcoin. So every original block or opcode, every original connection, and the elimination of anything that came new after it. So elimination of all of the soft forks and elimination of everything that came from any hard fork. And people don't realize that BTC right now is actually a hard fork of a hard fork. So BTC was orphaned in 2010, and a new chain was implemented because of that mass inflation bug.
Yes.
And then a similar thing happened also in 2013. In 2013, Jeff Garzik noticed, hey, all of a sudden this new change, pushed a bunch of corrupt data and screwed a bunch of stuff up. It was also an inflation bug. So in 2013, BTC orphaned again. And so the current BTC chain has only actually been around since 2013. And very few people know this. People don't talk about this very much. But BTC is itself a hard fork of a hard fork. There was not a contentious split, but it is what it is. BTC goes back to 2013.
Hard fork or soft fork?
It was a hard fork. There were also soft forks, but in 2013, the BTC chain orphaned, and a new chain replaced it with a new rule set that fixed a bug. So, yeah.
So, what are the main technical differences? Let us take the Bitcoin, BTC, and BSV. So, what are the main technical differences?
There's a lot of things. One of the big ones would be the soft forks. So the nature of a soft fork. Let's go back to explain what a Bitcoin transaction is. It's a chain of digital signatures. So when I receive a Bitcoin, it is validated by validating nodes that tell me that the signatures are valid. What a soft fork does is a soft fork takes new rules, and new rules essentially mean an invalid Bitcoin transaction.
Yes.
If you change the rules and the nodes disagree to the new rules, it splits. That's when you would have a split, and you would either have a new chain or it would orphan and you would follow the longest chain. Well, in BTC, soft fork means that you can change any rule you want. The developers can create any new concept. They can perhaps inflate the number of coins. They can change the signature schema. I mean, that's what SegWit is. That's also what masked signatures will be. Any of the Schnorr and Taproot upgrades, those will all come by soft fork, which means that those new rules will go into an envelope, and nodes will only be able to read the outside of the envelope. They won't be able to read the transactions that are inside the envelope because the transactions are invalid. They are not Bitcoin transactions. So they create a system where you can do anything you want to Bitcoin Core as long as you get the developers to agree to implement it as a soft fork. That's the kind of thing that cannot happen on Bitcoin SV. Bitcoin SV only recognizes valid Bitcoin signatures and valid things that occur in op return. So it is a 100% rules-based thing. If anything breaks a rule, it splits that node off the network, and that's it, which is why the BSV node count is low. It's because they have a very tight set of rules as to what is valid, because the goal is to implement Bitcoin as it was intended to be implemented. Whereas on BTC, they like to maximize the existence of nodes on the network, which is why there's probably 40,000 BTC nodes. But those nodes cannot validate anything inside of all of these soft fork transactions, which is most of the network at this point. So people think their nodes are validating transactions, and they are not. They are validating that soft fork rules are being followed. They can't see inside. They can't see the signatures. They can't verify the chain of digital signatures at all. They can only verify the signature that what's inside that soft fork envelope was put together by a trusted developer.
Yes. Okay, and no, it is just curious. So when you were brought into the Bitcoin Cash, so at the beginning you were into Bitcoin Cash, yes?
Yes, I was. I supported Bitcoin Cash before it existed.
Yes.
So as soon as it was an option, I thought that was the best option. Because for me, Bitcoin is about changing the world. It's about having sound money, and sound money must follow the rules, and those rules must be verifiable. And in Bitcoin Core, this notion of soft forking, in my opinion, invalidates BTC's ability to validate rules. So I was actually a big blocker starting in 2015. I remember when Bitcoin XT came out. Bitcoin XT was a node implementation that was programmed by Mike Hearn, who was probably the most influential developer of the era. Mike Hearn had a very close personal relationship with Satoshi Nakamoto because the month that Bitcoin came out in 2008.
With
Yes.
Craig Wright. With Craig Wright, yes?
I personally believe that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto, yes.
Okay, that's fine.
But it has not been publicly validated in a way that makes people feel that it's satisfied. So I'll differentiate for everybody's, so nobody has an aneurysm. but yes.
That's good. Thank you.
Yes, but Mike Hearn, I don't know Mike Hearn's opinion on whether or not Craig is Satoshi, but Mike had a relationship with Satoshi in 2008. Immediately when he read the first Bitcoin implementation, Mike began to send a series of emails to Satoshi Nakamoto and said, hey, can you explain this and that? And so he was a very curious person immediately when Bitcoin was released. Well, Mike is a Google developer. He's a very, very talented developer at Google, or he was at the time. I'm not sure if he is anymore. But he became one of the major developers of Bitcoin in the early days. And he and Satoshi would bounce ideas off each other constantly. So he is a very good source of information about Bitcoin. Well, after Satoshi left, Mike became sort of a de facto, like, hey, how would Satoshi want to do things? And Mike would give his opinion, and he would push code. He was developing all the time. Well, Mike, in 2015, developed a new Bitcoin node implementation, very similar to what happened with BCH and BSV. Like, hey, we're going to have a little hash war, and we're going to decide which way to go. Mike created a Bitcoin client that was capable of accepting 2 megabyte blocks and a bunch of other small enhancements, but things that would not split the network. But the thing that would split the network would be this 2 megabyte acceptance. Well, it didn't necessarily have to split the network at the time. People could use whatever node they wanted. It was actually common for people to use their own node implementations at the time. So Mike, who was popular because people knew he was personal friends with Satoshi, Mike garnered a lot of support. A lot of miners especially were like, hey, this is great. I would love to mine bigger blocks. There's more money in a bigger block for me, so why would I not go that direction? Well, all of a sudden, this narrative was created that Bitcoin XT was unsafe. It was insecure. It was designed by somebody who didn't understand Bitcoin and understand security.
Okay.
Well, Mike is like, psh, don't worry, I know what I'm doing, guys. Well, then all of a sudden there were these massive DOS attacks, which for anybody that doesn't know, a DOS attack is when tons of data is pushed across a network, forcing a node to crash. So Mike, he's a UK citizen, he lived in Great Britain, had his ISP DOSed. He was running a number of XT nodes, and so were some other miners. Well, all of a sudden, Mike's entire regional ISP was DOS attacked for days at the same time that a couple of other miners had their ISPs DOS attacked. So all of a sudden, all of these XT nodes got pushed off the network. And then you had people like Greg Maxwell and Samson Mao and these people from the Blockstream side of the conversation saying, oh, see, all these XT nodes crashed. We told you they were insecure. Nobody should upgrade to Bitcoin XT because that's very dangerous. We told you it was dangerous. And they all fell off the network because the software is bad. And so then Mike Hearn came back and gave a retort that, hey, excuse me, I was like, you broke the law, first of all. Second of all, you've inconvenienced my entire region was kicked off the internet for days because of you, which is essentially it's borderline act of terrorism against this town for living near me. And so but they just said, oh no, we would never do such a thing. But only ISPs where XT nodes existed were DOS attacked. So Mike Hearn wrote a letter and he quit the project. He said, you know what? I have tried for years to upgrade Bitcoin. I've given my opinion. I told everybody what Satoshi said. I've given every email I ever had between me and Satoshi, I've made public so people could read them. And the problem with everybody is that they hate Bitcoin and they hate Satoshi. And I love Bitcoin and I love Satoshi. And I quit because the project has been taken over by people who would rather be right than they would to do anything positive for Bitcoin. And he quit.
But all he needed was just to have a community. And that's it.
He did. And the problem is that the small blockers, the people that wanted 1 megabyte blocks forever, are very good at social engineering. They're professional community organizers. And they were willing to do things, which, again, I would say that's very dishonest to DDoS your competition. And then they would make the case, well, Mike Hearn's nodes failed. And here's the evidence of it. Mike Hearn is not trustworthy. He doesn't understand Bitcoin. You need to hand that power increasingly to guys like Greg Maxwell, Luke Dash Jr., Peter Wheel, and some of the other developers on that side.
Kurt.
Yeah.
If you are a smart guy, software engineer, come on, you should be ready for that. You should be ready for that. I remember I did piss somebody off with my streams for the Latin community. And yes, once we were starting our live streams, like maybe 2.5 years ago, the whole office building lost the internet immediately. So I just switched to 4G. That's it. Bought myself LTE modem, and that's it. And I was running a test. We started the live stream. The internet went down, and the live stream continued. And I just showed the middle finger, had a smile, and we rolled on.
I mean, I get that, and so my story about Mike Hearn is one story. There were so many other things that all happened at the same time. So at the same time, Gavin Andreessen had his keys revoked. Gavin Andreessen was the lead developer of the project at the time. When Gavin came out, so this is actually a long story too. I don't know how much time you want to sit and listen to this history, but in 2015, a lot of dominoes fell very, very quickly. So Blockstream was founded as a company. They were created by a series of Silicon Valley and EU venture capitalist groups that have connections to old big tech and old big banking. They created this developer group called Blockstream. They were given a $55 million seed round. And then all of a sudden, Wired Magazine and Gizmodo published an article about Craig Wright and said, this guy's Satoshi Nakamoto and blah, blah, blah. Well, Craig denied it. Said, no, I'm not Satoshi Nakamoto. Well, that same week, the Australian tax authority raided his home and they took all of the paperwork out of his house, put Craig on the run. Craig was on the run for about 6 months. He ended up living in exile in the UK. But a couple of days after he had left the UK, he approached a number of people. He approached Ian Grigg, who's one of the most respected living cryptographers. He approached Gavin Andreessen, who was the head of the Bitcoin project at the time. And he approached John Meskonis, who was the president of the Bitcoin Foundation at the time. The Bitcoin Foundation was the first attempt at creating a sort of a governance organization or whatever of trusted people to see if they could govern Bitcoin. And Craig signed with the Satoshi keys for those guys and said, hey, here's proof that I'm Satoshi Nakamoto. They're out to get me. They want to silence me about Bitcoin, and they want to take over the Bitcoin project. It's a Silicon Valley coup d'etat. Well, within the week, Gavin Andreessen was kicked out of the project. Ian Grigg came out to support him and say, Craig Wright's not going to slip one past me. There's no way he's not Satoshi Nakamoto. And to this day, I mean, he stands by it. And frankly, there's not really anybody that has more authority on cryptography to be able to say that Ian Grigg is incapable of verifying that independently. And then the Bitcoin Foundation immediately got treated as, well, we're not going to participate in this organization anymore, even though the Bitcoin Foundation was, was full of people who were respected at the time. So all of a sudden they became persona non grata as well. Then the same with the DOSing. Mike Hearn left, but there was a lot of threats of a lot of things, and a lot of people decided, I'm just leaving. This is too dangerous. I think Bitcoin is fun, and now that I'm being criticized or now that I'm being threatened, it's just not worth it for me. So that's why Mike left. Mike wanted to live his own life. Gavin also wanted to live his own life. They decided to stop fighting for Bitcoin because it became scary, and then it wasn't fun anymore. So then the new class of people who were in charge, the repo was run by people from the MIT Digital Currency Initiative and Blockstream at the time. Everybody that had repo access was affiliated with those two organizations. Both of those organizations were getting money from the same Silicon Valley and European venture capital organizations. And those venture capitalists have connections to the old central banking interests and a bunch of other nasty stuff. So at that point, a lot of people really treated Bitcoin like it was dead, and a lot of the big blockers just frankly left. They said, you know what, this project's no good. It's going to turn into a big money banking cartel asset for moving around big money and money laundering and all of these different things, and they weren't interested anymore. And so to see what Bitcoin has become, BTC, now all we talk about is, hey, who's the next big financial company that's going to buy a bunch of BTC? That's really the only thing that gets discussed anymore, but that's by design. That's what the venture capitalists wanted. That's why they started paying developers and paying for the creation of all these other tools and apps. And that's all cool. Like, Bitcoin, even still, I mean, I had my BTC until I sold out of most of it in 2017. So, I'm not going to complain about...
Okay, good timing.
I'm not going to complain about the money that was made, because that's great.
So quick question.
Yes.
So did you exchange your BTC for fiat or BSV?
At the time in 2017, so I was yes, I was part of a very public trading group. It was affiliated with a hedge fund and other things too. I was brought on as a fundamental analyst, and I publicly called for people to short BTC at any price above $18,000. So I said, just keep adding to your short at 18, and I called the bottom too. So like I said, close it anywhere between $4,000 and $3,000 because that's probably where it'll bounce. Well, I got death threats. I had people telling me I was out to kill Bitcoin. Yeah, it was bad. I ran a very big Facebook group at the time. It had about 60,000 members in it, and
wow,
a lot of people were very mad that I was saying to short Bitcoin in 2017. But I basically called the top of the market, which also made people very upset. And I stayed out of a Bitcoin position for quite a long time. I didn't really have any version of Bitcoin or any real cryptocurrency for most of 2018. And then really got back involved. I was still involved socially. I loved Bitcoin as a concept. So I was running meetups and all kinds of things. But in 2018, I got very passionate about what was happening with the Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin SV split right there, and I became more vocal and got myself back involved and started to earn Bitcoin. I'm a big believer in earning Bitcoin. I buying buying with your fiat money is just kind of like it's boring to me. I would rather find interesting ways to earn it. So that's where I'm at.
So how do you earn it? Mine it?
I do a number of things. So yeah, I've been in the mining economy for a long time. I'm affiliated with some of the bigger miners in the space. I'm also an author.
Which ones?
So I work. Just recently, I took a position with the Air Group, which is Calvin Air organization. I know everyone will say that I am now officially a BSV shill. But I've like I said, I've been a big blocker for a long time. I just accepted this position in November of this year. So I've been a paid Calvin Air employee for 6 weeks. So,
but what do you have to do there?
I am a historian. I was hired to be the chief historian for CoinGeek Media. So CoinGeek Media does news, and it's my job to tell the old stories, tell the history of Bitcoin, and to help any newcomers, anybody in the media or in our organization to understand, like, hey, what was 2013 like, or how did this actually happen in 2015 or 16? And so that's my job. I oversee the historical accuracy of the things that are reported at CoinGeek, and I write myself. I do my own editorials.
I love the design of your website. Really simple, effective. So many cryptocurrency websites are overflooded with information.
Yeah,
absolutely useless. So neat, beautiful. Really good job for the whole team that maintains it. But still, CoinGeek is all about BSV, isn't it?
Yes. So CoinGeek was founded. It was actually purchased. They were a news organization previously. Calvin Air got involved in the mining space, I believe in 2017 or 18, and started buying hash power. He started buying ASICs and building out a big mining operation.
USA, somewhere else, Canada.
All over. So Calvin is a Canadian citizen. I believe he's also an Antiguan citizen, but they are mining all over. As far as I'm aware, there's operations in Eastern Europe, as well as parts of Asia, and I believe there's some North America also. But if you want to look at the TAL, Taal mining group, is the largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining group in the world.
Wow.
So all of their stuff is publicly available. The number of ASICs, the amount of hash power, profitability, all of that stuff is publicly audited. It has a public board of directors. Calvin is he's the founder or something. I don't know what his title is at TAL, but they're a major mining organization. So I'm not employed by TAL, but I work for some parent company that's involved there somewhere. But there you can see exactly where their stuff is based on their publicly available information at tal.com.
And what's their interest between mining, behind mining? Really?
What do you mean?
Well, why do companies like that invest so large assets in mining when, if they mine in Eastern Europe, electricity is not cheap. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to steal it. Yes, to be profitable, absolutely. That is what many Bitcoiners or whatever cryptocurrency miners do.
Sure.
Then the next thing, America, you could get some places cheaper, but mostly electricity is not cheap. And is mining really that profitable? Or is it cheaper to buy the coin and wait?
I think for an individual, it's definitely cheaper to just invest and hope to make money. And this is part of why I was comfortable accepting a position at a Calvin Air company, is that there are a lot of easy ways to make money. There are a lot of scammy ways to make money in the crypto space, especially for someone like Calvin, who's a billionaire. So you can create all kinds of pump and dumps and all kinds of things with flashy marketing, and you can make money off of fake hype. Well, the most difficult way to make money in the Bitcoin space is to buy hardware and invest fundamentally in creating well-connected infrastructure in order to become what the Bitcoin white paper refers to as an honest node. And Calvin wanted to build blocks. He said, you know what? I know this is going to be unpopular. People don't want to hear about big block Bitcoin. we are not well liked because we believe Bitcoin should not be bound to 1 megabyte blocks forever. So he did an unpopular and expensive path to doing Bitcoin the way he thinks it should be done. And so I wouldn't be surprised to hear if it was $500 million was invested in ASIC mining equipment, as well as some of the other venture groups. So some of the businesses that are creating transactions and trying to develop their own companies on top of the BSV blockchain were also invested in as well. And he believes in the long-term viability of the project to create fundamental value for the world. And I would be inclined to call him a liar if he didn't put his own money into building such a massive, I mean, it's physical infrastructure that's stuck in physical locations. It's in warehouses and stuff. This is not easy to liquidate if you're going to, scam and disappear. So I think Calvin is a very heavily underrated and unfairly criticized businessman in the Bitcoin space.
So, and they mine BSV mostly, or what do they mine?
Primarily, I know they do mine BTC as well, so they will join other pools and mine BTC if it's quite a bit more profitable. They have to do what's best for their shareholders. So when BTC is more profitable to mine, they certainly do mine it, but they also mine BSV. But an interesting note is that no Calvin Ayre owned organization controls the majority of hash power on the BSV chain. In fact, the last I checked, which was a few days ago, that Huobi out of China was the biggest miner on BSV the other day. Also, Binance via BTC, Antpool, they all mine blocks on BSV. Calvin is not even a majority miner on BSV, despite what people think that it's just Calvin.
Let us rewind it a bit. Binance?
Mm-hmm. Binance has a mining pool, and they do mine BSV. Mm-hmm.
Which one is their mining pool?
It's called Binance Pool. I
haven't heard of it either.
Yep.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at the hash distribution on Bitcoin SV, you'll see OKX. So a few exchanges do have mining pools. Huobi, OKX, and Binance are the biggest ones that mine BSV. But even Antpool, F2 Pool, which I think F2 Pool is probably the biggest BTC mining pool at the moment. They also mine BSV. So it's funny to hear these criticisms of BSV as this coin that nobody cares about, and yet most of the hash power on BTC will also turn and mine BSV blocks when they're profitable, and they're interested. In fact, some of them have even mined. I've seen 8 megabyte blocks and stuff mined by a couple of people who talk about we don't need big blocks, and okay, well, you're mining them, so that's an interesting way to to not have your rhetoric match your behavior.
What's the full size of BSV node compared to Bitcoin Cash node and Bitcoin node?
What do you mean by size?
By size. Is there a size? Like full size would be 2 terabytes, something?
To synchronize the whole node?
Yes, absolutely. Less than terabyte, I think it was for...
It's actually, I'm not sure on the exact size. It's actually smaller than BTC or last I checked anyways. I don't check regularly, but BTC consistently has 1 megabyte blocks every 10 minutes.
Yes.
BSV doesn't necessarily. However, the average block size on BSV is growing and is typically between 1 and 2 megabytes itself.
Okay.
But the interesting thing about BSV is that I have not seen a week go by where there has not been a 20 megabyte block or a 30 megabyte block go by. And that's really the point, is that, it doesn't need to be a terabyte block every 10 minutes, yes, but you do need to have that available bandwidth to deal with a spike. And BSV has available bandwidth to deal with a spike. And the largest block ever mined was about 370 megabytes on the mainnet. Settled just fine. The next block was settled in less than 10 minutes, actually. So didn't have any problem propagating across the network, and it just kept going. In fact, it wasn't even a celebration. Had this happened 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been, big news across the, holy cow, this is, everybody said this would be impossible. But big blocks are pretty regular on BSV. They happen pretty often. But the average block size, like I said, the typical traffic is a megabyte or 2. and no big deal. And then there's a mining pool that mines empty blocks all the time too. So they're, one transaction and a 500 kilobyte block will go by and like, oh,
Okay.
thanks, that's nice.
Kurt, I will allow you to have a sip of drink. And
Thank you.
of course, you can ask your questions. And I do apologize. I've got so many questions, and then I will start putting on the screen your questions. What about the transaction fees? Recently, it was a huge issue with Ethereum. And times by times, it does return to the Bitcoin. So what about the SV?
So it's interesting. So you can measure your transaction fees in a couple of ways. You can go by the US dollar rate, which right now is about 1/100th of a penny, regardless of block size. In fact, the fee typically goes down as the block size goes up because it's more profitable to mine a bigger block. And therefore, they're willing to give a discount. Miners will discount fees in bigger blocks. But you can also measure it by Satoshis per byte. Everybody uses 1 Satoshi per byte as the standard because they assume you can't go less than 1 Satoshi per byte, but that's not true. On Bitcoin SV, a number of miners, because the protocol is not not made by the software developers. If a mining pool wants to accept half a Satoshi per byte or quarter of Satoshi per byte fees, they do that. So there's a couple of mining. One of the mining pools that does this often is called Mempool. They're out of China. CEO is a guy named Lin Zemming, and he's willing to give special contracts. He says, hey, if you will broadcast your transactions directly to my mining pool, I will give you a deal for a quarter Satoshi per byte transaction fees. And so if you have a data-heavy business, and there are a few data-heavy businesses in the BSV economy, they have contracts with Mempool to do quarter Satoshi per byte fees. And we expect those to continue to go down as the average block size goes up, because what happens when businesses compete with each other? Well, prices go down for the end user. So we expect that as more people come in and want to use the Bitcoin SV blockchain for data-heavy services specifically, that those miners will continue to compete with each other and say, okay, maybe I'll do a fifth of a Satoshi per byte. I'm willing to give better rates if you're willing to send me more business. And we're already seeing that happen as the fees continue to go down and block sizes go up.
I just had a thought. Recently, I was talking to Joel. So of course, huge Dash guy, and I love Dash. The idea behind them, and Joel is such a cool guy. And we were talking about Doge, and I have noticed that so many people use Doge just to move out their stuff out of the exchanges.
Sure.
To move their funds quickly and cheaply, as cheap as possible. So could it be the case that SV can be cheaper than Doge?
It could be. I think the problem is that exchanges set their own rules.
Especially
so
as the largest one is Binance, and if Binance loves SV, then
yeah, but they don't. So Binance doesn't offer BSV to anybody to purchase. They mine BSV blocks, but they don't sell BSV at Binance. So
wait. Are you saying that you cannot buy or sell? You can't trade SV at Binance?
Correct.
What?
And a number of other exchanges, Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini, they have all taken a public stance that they will not support Bitcoin SV.
And when did it happen? I do apologize for my smile. Seriously,
No,
it is, from my curiosity point. That's really amazing.
No, I'm happy to tell the story always. So about a year ago, there was a number of social media uproars about Craig Wright being a fraud. So the notion that Craig Wright claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto but has not sufficiently proven it to the rabble, the rabble decided to come out in force and say then, well, he's a fraud and he needs to be taken down by the community. To which Craig Wright has said, I don't owe anybody an explanation. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to do business with me. You're not a client of mine. If you call me a fraud, that you're plainly harassing me. It's libel. This is the industry that I work in, and you're telling the industry where I do business that I'm a liar, even though it's just your opinion that I'm a liar. So Craig, he said, you know what? The next person that calls me a fraud, I'm going to sue for libel. The popular account HODLNOT was the first person to come out and say, well, I'll say it, Craig Wright, you're a fraud. And Craig said, well, I'll see you in court. To which he laughed and said, I'm anonymous. You're not going to be able to find me. And Craig said, hey, well, there's money available for anyone that can tell me who he is, and then we will have him served paperwork. And that upset a lot of people because they view that as a doxing. And to which Craig said, well, I'm not making his information publicly available. I'm asking if somebody can give me his information privately so I can serve him court paperwork because he asked me to sue him and thinks it's funny. So let's see how funny it is. And then in response to all of that, the sort of media uproar across everything, CZ from Binance, the CEO of Binance, very publicly threatened to delist Bitcoin SV from his exchange. And then when the lawsuits didn't go away, he did delist. Kraken also delisted. We saw the same from Shapeshift. They all kind of tumbled one after another. And then a few others, Coinbase and Gemini, both said like, well, we never listed it anyways, and we're never gonna, ha ha ha. And so that same sort of cabal of people who were involved in creating the BSV split then decided that they were going to do their best to destroy the Bitcoin SV chain that we didn't even want created. And now it's very difficult to get Bitcoin SV, especially in the United States. But there are places to get it. I mean, OKX has an American branch called OKCoin where you can buy BSV. Americans can do that just fine. Bittrex, Poloniex, they haven't been political. You can buy BSV there. So I think it's funny that they act like you can't get BSV anywhere, and you can. It's just a little more difficult, and people prefer to use places like Coinbase. But you know, at the end of the day, we're not competing to be a pump coin. I don't really care to see. You know, I think we saw BTC and go up 25% or something in the last 5 days. So that's that's great, but it doesn't really. I don't think that's good for sound money. It doesn't make it useful for business. It's just a trading commodity, which is fun. Again, I like to earn money, but that's not the most interesting part of Bitcoin, in my opinion.
I can see a beautiful question, and if I can,
Yeah.
and to all the guys who leave comments, do not argue against themselves. Do not call anybody a fraud if you have not got the proof.
Mm-hmm.
Let us be civilized. And if Craig Wright is a Satoshi, and I'm not saying that, I would be really careful about that. But again, I can't call him fraud neither. So, how many? Here you go. And how many Bitcoin? I understand, not Bitcoins, not in plural, but Bitcoin. How many Bitcoin does Satoshi own? And if Craig Wright is Satoshi, has he explained what is that huge bulk? Has he lost the keys? Has he still got the keys? Please.
So
interesting. Thank you, Craig.
It is fascinating, and as an observer, I'm also fascinated by the sort of history of Satoshi and all of that. I don't know. I don't have any firsthand knowledge. I said previously, I know Craig Wright, but it's a sort of a business relationship. So he and I are not the type to go have drinks, but he and I are cordial, and we work together a bit on various things, and of course we agree about Bitcoin, but. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of why Craig does anything that he does. He's his own man and makes his own decisions. But to answer the first question, Satoshi probably owns between 1 million and 1.2 million Bitcoins. Those would be the Bitcoins that he mined during the first 2 years of the existence of Bitcoin. Okay. As to whether or not Craig has the keys or anybody has the keys.
Yes.
I mean, we don't know until we know. I tend to believe Craig's story, what Craig has said about it, both in court and in real life. Otherwise, is that he set up a trust, and in that trust were various parties. There's various trustees, and this is a common thing. Craig worked in cybersecurity for many, many years. Most of his career has been in cybersecurity and academic computer science. He holds patents on ATM software and banking software and gambling software and all kinds of things. He's a financial software programmer and security specialist. So
for all those who are saying that he can't code anything, here's your answer.
he was a C++ teacher at university. So he himself would say, I'm not a great commercial coder, but I am an academic coder. I can teach coding, but is he a code ninja? No, just like anything else, I think you need to practice on a regular basis to remain great at coding, but he's a capable academic coder.
We can see that as a person then, really. Well,
yep.
Well, you have your opinion. Isn't that
sure
that anybody can have their own opinions?
Yeah.
As long as you do not insult anybody, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to that, Craig has worked for a very long time. He's an older gentleman. He's in his late 50s, and he has had a lot of money for a long time. He's had a lot of complex international business interests, and he has various trusts. So he explained to the courts and various people, I set up a very complicated trust for my Bitcoin because I believed that it would have a lot of value someday, and I didn't want people to be able to threaten me or my family, basically put a gun to his head and say, give me all your Bitcoins, if it were to ever leak that he had them. So he set up this complicated, what he calls the Tulip Trust, and that's allegedly where the Bitcoins are. But I have not seen anything. I have not seen anything that isn't publicly available. So that is that's as much as I know about it. Because again, Craig is just like anybody else. I don't know how much money my neighbors have either. So
Tulip Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Who is behind Tulip Trust?
It's a good question. I'm not actually crystal clear on who that is. There are a number of unnamed anonymous trustees, and then there are also some named trustees, but their names escape me at the moment. So I'm not. I don't have a great answer to that question. I also do not know if Craig himself is a trustee, but allegedly there is a group of trustees that make sure that Craig is insulated from the ability to threaten him for his Bitcoins.
What are your thoughts on other altcoins? Let us say, what are your thoughts about Ethereum and their newest move?
I tend to think that almost every altcoin project is at best a hobby project, and I think at worst, and unfortunately the most common is that they are blatant scams. I think if you look at the existence of...
Can I quickly ask you, and just say scam or not? Ethereum.
I'm going to say yes.
Ethereum Classic?
Actually, no. I think Ethereum Classic is an honest... I think the people that established Ethereum Classic, and I don't know if they've changed. I don't keep up with Ethereum Classic, so maybe this has all changed. But in my opinion, the people that split to keep the Ethereum chain uncensored, I think was done from a place of really desiring for Ethereum to succeed by being truthful. So at the very least, I respect the people that kept mining the Ethereum Classic chain at the time. But I can't speak to... I haven't paid attention to it in 2 years or more. So
absolutely, like all the attacks, 51% attacks, like so many of them. Okay, the next one's Monero, Fluffy Pony.
I think it was established as a fascinating project. I think Monero is one of the most interesting projects in the entire space. Absolutely. I do, however, think that it has gone down a path that I don't like at all, and I think it exists not as a scam, but I don't think that it's a viable long-term project. So I don't particularly like Monero at this point. But I do think it has a fascinating founding, and it's a very from a software and all kinds of different standpoints, it's a very interesting project, or at least it was.
Okay, Dash.
Similarly, I think Dash has a reputation of being founded as a scam, which I tend to think is untrue, but nonetheless,
No, it started like another coin.
well, people believe that the founder pre-mined it on purpose, and I think it was some kind of an inflation bug that was inherent in Litecoin, which is where Dash was forked from. And there was some absurd number of coins that got mined in the first 24 hours, and people assumed that was done nefariously. I don't know how you could prove that one way or another. However, I think the Dash community has worked really hard to create a viable project, and I respect their goals and their vision and everything else. I don't own any Dash. I wouldn't recommend necessarily that anybody buy Dash or anything like that, but I do not think they're a scam. I think they're an honest group of people that believe in their project.
Okay, let us dig in deeper. Can we go?
Yeah.
Can we cover a few more?
Yeah.
Ripple.
I think so. Ripple, the company. I think Ripple is a blatant scam. I think it is a massive securities fraud. Yeah.
Cardano.
I think Cardano is a scam.
God.
So Cardano is interesting. So Charles Hoskinson was a co-founder of Ethereum. He's a brilliant computer scientist in his own right. I don't want to take anything away from Charles, the programmer. But any project that has been in production for years and years, and claiming to be this thoroughly academically tested and all of these different things, like that's the purpose of open source development, is to have multiple groups of eyes auditing code and all of these things. And Charles sort of floated this idea that they're going to be this special blockchain because it was, third party audited by X, Y, and Z. And there's still not really a project going on. And then I have all kinds of fundamental issues with anything that uses a proof of stake variation. And Cardano ticks all my boxes for things that are both a bad idea and plausibly scams. But I think there's no reason for Cardano to exist, and therefore its existence is likely just simply to be able to sell tokens. So that's my opinion on it.
Tron.
Probably the biggest scam in crypto, in my opinion.
This one. No, come on. The king is one coin, isn't it?
There are a lot of big blatant scams. I think the interesting...
Once we talk about emperors, like, the biggest, with a big smile.
Yeah, we'll let them all fight it out.
With Excel sheet. All they have. Yeah. Let us hope they have an Excel sheet, or at least had in the very beginning.
I think what I mean by that is, so Justin Sun is such a passionate and intelligent businessman, that he's so capable of keeping people entranced into Tron being a good idea that even if it was not the biggest scam, I think the fact that it continues to exist in such a way that allows him to absorb actual other businesses of value. I think if you add up the money that has been created out of thin air, is just phenomenal over at Tron. So Justin, I don't know how that ends for him, but it's a fascinating one.
BNB, Binance Coin. Oh.
I mean, I don't like Binance. I actually think there's quite a bit of evidence.
Oh God, but yes.
So from a business standpoint, by all means, I mean they're a great business if you're one of the people trying to profit on the side of Binance. So that's let's separate that from what I think is fundamentally going on at Binance, which is a lot of
your understanding of the word scam. So, but we can return to that later. Yes. So
yeah. So BNB is brilliant from a fundraising perspective, but I think it's an illegal security, plain and simple. It's a token that is perceived to exist in order to provide greater ability to sell it later, which is most things. That's what most people want out of their cryptocurrency investments, is to buy something and then sell it for a lot more money later. So it's not what people are not expecting. However, the way that it creates, it's sort of treated like a de facto equity in the company of Binance in such a way that's confusing to a great many people, and therefore I think is likely illegal. And but that would go hand in hand with a whole bunch of other things that I think are going on at Binance. So Binance is the biggest recipient of Tether. They have the vast majority of all Tether trading in the world. I think Tether is a completely made up fake asset.
That was the next one in the line. Yes. USDT.
Tether, I think Tether is probably the biggest and most insidious scam in the entire space. I think it's not only just a scam in order to create money. I think it's a money laundering scheme for some really nasty characters in the world. So what I believe is happening is that they are using the private ledgers of places like Binance to have people send their real money. They'll send real Bitcoin into Binance, and when they make their withdrawals, they receive dirty Bitcoins. And on the other side, the insiders either get clean fiat or clean BTC that they can then continue to do other nefarious business with. And the wash trading and the stuff that occurs on the private ledger on the inside of Binance, we may never know. But their relationship with Tether and how all of that works out, these big players are not buying Tether to buy BTC. I guarantee Michael Saylor did not call Tether and say, "Hey, can I exchange, $100 million of dollars for Tethers so that I can buy BTC?" He called an OTC desk. He gave real fiat to somebody who gave him BTC. So, all of this Tether supply going up, I believe the Tether supply volume is still continuing to accelerate. But who's using Tether? It's just for wash trading inside these exchanges. So I get very worried about what's actually happening in the background at Binance with Tether.
Well, I can see that Tether is used and it has got good functionality. But these are your thoughts.
Yeah.
So what about the Bitcoin Cash then?
Bitcoin Cash I don't think is a blatant scam, but I think it's at this point sort of an unnecessary, silly project. I think they want to use it for the creation of dark markets. They want it to be another Monero, essentially. So that's the roadmap they're on. But I think that affects its. Oh yeah, they're adding everything on their roadmap is about anonymity, obfuscation of transactions. They're trying to approach some things that they've taken from Zcash and some other things that they've taken from Monero, and then some original ideas as well. So there's Cash Fusion and some of the other things that they're working on that make completely anonymous Bitcoin Cash transactions. So, but in my opinion, that's obviously going to pigeonhole you into being primarily a crime-related coin, and then, how does that work for mass adoption and, them wanting to be cash for the world and all of that? I don't think that plays out.
And then two more coins. So you mentioned Zcash.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about Zcash? So Ace.
I think Zcash is probably
Zcash a bit, yes.
Yeah, again, like with some of these things, like I used to GPU mine at home and stuff. I've mined a little bit of Zcash and that kind of thing back when I was trying to figure out how all of this stuff works. And Zuko is an interesting programmer and all of that. So I don't want to necessarily say these people are all criminals, but Zcash is an anonymity coin. It's designed to do business that can't be seen, and that does have some limited, interesting use cases, but. We don't.
Is it really for business that should not be seen? Just to respect the privacy. Just people who prefer to stay private. What is wrong with choosing to stay private? You don't have to do illegal things.
There's a big. So I'm a privacy advocate. I'm very much a libertarian. But there's a difference between privacy and anonymity, and most people use those words very differently. Privacy is what you do in your own home, for example. People don't know if I'm wearing pants right now because I'm in my home and you can only see me from the chest up. Then that's my right to privacy right there. And that is what Bitcoin is. People don't necessarily need to know what I'm doing with my Bitcoin. They can see that a transaction exists. They don't necessarily know that it's my transaction. So that's privacy. Anonymity is when you're in public, but people do not know who you are. So this is me wearing a hockey mask at the bank. Now, that's a very different thing than privacy. That's not, I don't have a right to privacy in public or in somebody else's property. I have a right to, or they have a right to audit me. They have a right to say, can this guy be here right now? Which is why I'm not allowed to, it's funny now with the whole COVID-19 thing and, wearing masks everywhere. But traditionally, that sort of anonymity is not desirable for business or for anything else. So privacy is very good, but anonymity is almost always used for doing something bad. So those are two different things. Bitcoin is private, but things like Zcash and Monero are anonymous. So they're different sorts of tools. And anonymity really is only for crime. You can privately do all kinds of business, but why do you need to be anonymous? That's the real question.
For the crime, you have cash. Come on. No, the best thing for the crime is cash.
I agree, but we are trying to be cash for the world. That's the thing. Like these are conversations that need to be had now, because I believe that Bitcoin was designed to replace.
Let us say artificial intelligence comes in. The only thing that can keep you anonymous is cash.
Sure.
Let us jump on. Let us say we have 10 more minutes, and we can always return, Kurt.
Yeah.
This conversation is amazing. And the last thing, Litecoin. Just Bitcoin and friends. I was recently rewatching the cartoon. It made me so sad. So sad. As they kept bashing Litecoin. So what are your thoughts on Litecoin? And Mr. Charlie.
I don't like Litecoin. I don't see what its purpose is in the world. I truly believe that the most valuable thing for the world is to have a single blockchain that we all use as money. That's how money is most valuable, is if we all share it. So every time an altcoin is created, it takes value away from what we should be using. And we should be using the Bitcoin that we can all use, that can bear all of our weight, essentially.
Well, but if you're looking for one currency only, cryptocurrency only, why not stick with Bitcoin then? Just accept as it is and that's it.
It's incapable.
Why?
It can't scale. It can't scale at all. It cannot deal with anything.
It does the job all the time, and it becomes better and better. And now when the Lightning Network is in,
Lightning Network can't work. It would take generations of full blocks in order to have everybody use Lightning Network. So
I use Lightning Network. Absolutely awesome.
Yes, you can, but it's because it is in a place where you do not have the traffic to use it. The demand there on the blocks is not it's not big enough to cause the problem, essentially. However, the likelihood of your Lightning transactions succeeding or failing is still very low. Failed Lightning transactions get exponentially worse as you approach amounts even around $50. And it's because of the exponential routing problem that is had on that network. Can that deal with being, could it work with being 10 times or 100 times bigger? Because to be a global money, it would need to be many thousands of times bigger than it is today. But also, if the 1 megabyte block size is permanent, then it would take it would take literally generations. It would take hundreds of years for everybody to open a Lightning wallet. So it's just an impossible thing. So it doesn't make sense. So what actually makes sense with BTC, the only thing that makes sense with BTC is for custodians to hold your Bitcoin and for them to allow you to use a Visa or something against that asset. That is the only way that BTC could be used. And to me, that's very uninteresting to me because I came from gold. This is actually what interested me in Bitcoin in the first place. Right. And I can store gold as a store of value. That's fine. And then if I can spend a derivative off that gold, that's great. And for BTC to be so small that it can only really be that is just such a disappointment, especially considering all of the things that the Bitcoin protocol is capable of, like global virtual machines, tokenization, smart contracts, and being able to connect and monetize all that value so that your in-person commerce can integrate with your digital commerce around the world at the same time. Like Bitcoin is capable of infinite possibilities, and it's been so whittled down in BTC that the best case scenario is for you to essentially hold a Visa card that has a B printed on it and pretend that that's revolutionary. And I just don't find that interesting.
So why not? Why should you? So you were kicked off the 2018 competition, yes, between between ABC and SV. So at that point, why did you have to stay your own coin? Why not to join original Bitcoin? Like and just try to improve it. Talk to community.
Plain and simple, the gatekeepers of the Bitcoin Core repo are they're ideological people. They're not making decisions based on community consensus or business interest. They have a very ideological viewpoint about what BTC is. In fact, the only debates that have been had there among the people that have repo keys is whether or not they should lower the block size limit on BTC. So this is culturally like asking Israel and Palestine why they can't just, let's just set aside our differences and agree to share Jerusalem.
So that would be that would actually be the main point of discussions. Yes. So they want to decrease the size, and you want to take off all the limits.
I believe that Bitcoin is a very specific open protocol, that it can be defined by whoever is willing to mine it or use it. And the BTC mindset is that is not the case, that the definition is chosen by anyone who's capable of running a $60 node. And that's a Sybil attack vector, that if I can spin up 10,000 nodes that are all signaling, hey, I want a 50 kilobyte block size limit, then it's very difficult for people in BTC to say whether or not that is an honest signal or a dishonest signal. So it's quite easy to Sybil attack and then social engineer the BTC community into believing that the intelligentsia of BTC are making the right decision. And therefore, I just think culturally, their lack of belief in the fact that Bitcoin is capable of working and that it's capable of being governed by proof of work, by honest nodes that build blocks. It's a conversation. This is very much like asking capitalists and communists to set aside their differences and just agree to live, in a way and do business together. Like, they don't believe in the same definition of business or property or money, and therefore there's too many philosophical conversations that need to happen for us to even be capable of being good neighbors. So it's a very low value proposition to assume that you could make a change in BTC that is not approved by people that fundamentally believe that Bitcoin cannot scale and should not scale. So I'm very disinterested in that idea.
Okay. Then there is a question. So I've told that just this conversation, just existence of this conversation pissed off Latvian community. So this stream this stream goes into seven different places at the same place at the same time. So Host Maria is just the main brand. Then there is Latvian community, and it is the largest Latvian community for cryptocurrencies, I would say so. And we have Bitcoin maximalist.
Sure.
His correction has been included into the Bitcoin core as well. So we call him Mr. Bitcoin, and he is pissed off that you guys use the name Bitcoin. What are the wars behind the names? Please, correct. Thank you.
I mean, that's a good question. I guess we can go back to the open source license of what Bitcoin is, right? So Satoshi gave an open source license and a definition of Bitcoin. The definition of Bitcoin, it goes back to the white paper, and the white paper itself and the first software implementation have a license. If you look at what that license is, Bitcoin has a very clear definition. And if that definition has been changed without a change in the validity of the license, then whoever changed the definition would be the one that is using the name unjustly. So if you were to look at the implementations of Bitcoin, BTC has fundamentally changed the definition for what a Bitcoin is, which is a chain of digital signatures. and it is now very much all kinds of different things. So a SegWit transaction is a good example of something that is not a Bitcoin transaction. And that license was never updated to say that a Bitcoin transaction could be redefined, fundamentally redesigned at the protocol level. So this is a very weird situation. This is like me forking the Linux repo, changing something fundamental about the Linux kernel, and saying, well, we're Linux now because most of the developers agreed with me. If I could get most of the Linux community to agree that Linux is a redefined thing, well, whoever owns the license would have a base to sue me for fraud, for fundamentally changing that thing and creating a social engineering campaign to get people to think that the real Linux is not the real Linux and everything else. So these things are...
that is when you hold a license.
Correct.
When it is a community project, then the majority wins.
But it's only a community project to a point. So, for example, like Litecoin, they forked the Bitcoin Core repo and they created Litecoin. So they said, we're a different project. We are Litecoin. That's not an aberration. The license allows that. But what the license does not allow is to redefine Bitcoin, but then also keep the name Bitcoin. So whoever changed the protocol, like at a fundamental level, and this is not, I'm not talking about, little trimmings here and there. I'm talking about a fundamental change in the definition of a Bitcoin, but maintaining the Bitcoin name, that's a violation of the license right there. It's a violation of truly a social contract as well. Like if I am to understand that Bitcoin is a specific thing and it was changed, well, that's that's plain and simple. Like that is an act of fraud.
So what about this comment?
BTC getting the name stripped away, I actually think it's an interesting thing. If you look at
Really?
like Greg, I do. They've fundamentally changed the protocol, and if you look at the people who advocated for it,
just kept improving it based on the majority vote, or
not really about majority vote. So it was not by hash power, which is how the white paper defined how the community should secure the chain. That's the governance model of Bitcoin, is that the most nodes that build blocks, they build blocks on valid transactions, that chain is the valid Bitcoin chain. And that's not what happened in 2017. In 2017, they redefined what's what UASF, the SegWit fork, came along with. They're all wearing UASF hats. That's user activated soft fork. So that means as a user, a person that can run a $60 node is actually the person that's governing Bitcoin. That is a massive change in governance. In my opinion, that's a coup d'etat. That's an undercutting of the governance model that did not occur by vote. The Bitcoin white paper is very clear at how you can change things in Bitcoin. An upgrade in Bitcoin occurs by proof of work. That's not how BTC gets upgraded anymore.
Are you saying that BTC is not Bitcoin?
If you define Bitcoin by its license or by its white paper or by any other establishment of the definition of the word Bitcoin or the network Bitcoin or the database that we call Bitcoin, I would say no. BTC does not fit the definition of a Bitcoin. Most transactions are not Bitcoin transactions on BTC. They are signed by a fundamentally different protocol, but they don't delineate. They don't tell you that you are not receiving a Bitcoin signature. You have not received a Bitcoin signature if you've received a SegWit transaction, for example. It is a cryptocurrency that uses a different set of rules that are not Bitcoin rules.
Here you go.
Yep.
Can we say, and for the end, so you would confirm that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto?
I believe that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. In my opinion, based on the evidence that I've seen about the things that he knows about Bitcoin that were not previously known, for example, the Turing Complete script stack was a bomb that he dropped on everybody in 2015. He had Nick Szabo and other people laughed at him and said, well, no, that's not the case. But right now on BSV, there is a Turing Complete game being played nonstop on the network today that proves that the original implementation of Bitcoin is Turing complete, but nobody knew this. Nobody knew it until Craig explained it, and they still debate whether or not it's true. And yet the empirical evidence exists for everyone to see, and they don't want to hear it because they don't like Craig Wright, they don't like BSV, and frankly, that means they do not like the Bitcoin protocol. They do not like Bitcoin's capabilities. They like something else. They want the name, but they don't think that Bitcoin works without it having been, as you said, upgraded. Well, those upgrades are not Bitcoin upgrades. Those are somebody else's idea, and they make Bitcoin fundamentally limited. So before the upgrades, Bitcoin was capable of more things. So if you like Bitcoin's unbounded capabilities, then you really don't have a choice but to look at where is it unbounded. It is only unbounded and publicly available and set in stone on Bitcoin SV.
Wow, that was strong. And the best way to contact you, Kurt?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Kurt Wuckert Jr. It's just my name. You can hit me up in basically anywhere. You can hit me on Telegram or Keybase or a whole bunch of other places at Kurt Wuckert Jr. You can read my articles at CoinGeek.com. I'm also a frequent podcast guest in a number of other places. And by all means, talk to me. Send me DMs. I like to talk. I'm not here to be an overlord, and I know my ideas are very unpopular, but I believe them with my heart. I've believed them since since a long time ago. So this is what I believe to be good and true and just, and I want freedom for the whole world, and that's why I'm here.
This will be the best one, yes?
Yes.
Find more information about you. So
absolutely.
CoinGeek.com. Warning, it is all about SV.
Yes, sir.
Life is beautiful. God. Amazing community. All the power to you. Seriously.
Thank you.
All the best. All the best. Just do not
I appreciate
kill
it.
Please. Respect to all,
Yes.
to all the
Thank you.
crypto animals. Crypto is awesome.